Hi everyone, my name is Ben Sunderland, Sales Engineer at Datadog, and today we're going to give a demonstration of the incident response capability of Datadog. Incident response provides customers a unified incident response experience from monitoring their Slack to paging responders to remediating issues. It accelerates remediation by coordinating services, dependencies, teams, saving time by finding the right people to collaborate with. Using on-call analytics, customers can measure the performance of their engineering teams with all the paging and incident responder data. So we're going to start the demo by looking at traditional Datadog monitor. And in this case, we're looking at the count of error logs coming out of our web store service. In particular, we're looking for 503 errors from that service. And as normal, we would mention the notification channels that we want Datadog to send this alert to. And that would typically be Slack or Teams or ServiceNow or any number of integrations that we have out of the box. In this case, we've added an additional one, which is our on-call. And I'm able to mention the on-call team, and it's just denoted by on-call dash and then the team name in this case. And that's how we're going to start the demo. So just to show you how this would work, if I go test notification and run a test, that should send an alert to the notification channel of my choice. And then you can just hear that fire on my mobile device. So I'm going to launch the Datadog app and quickly acknowledge that so it doesn't ruin the demo. Okay, so let's continue with the setup. So what do I need to set this up? So we're going to go to the concept of the teams. So Datadog has had the concept of teams for a number of years, and it basically allows you to organize content in Datadog, whether it be metrics, logs, or traces, and the various functions. If you just want to see your dashboards, your traces, your metrics, then you can use teams to isolate that information and scope that. So we've extended the teams concept for on-call. And if I'm the member of the payment transactions team, for example, not only can I filter based on that team, but I can also define a set of users that are members of that team, and they can now be paged within a single group. So if we can see in this example, I'm a member of the payment transactions team with my 7 other members, and you can see we've set up this page routing, and that is our first kind of logic. It will give us the day of the week prioritization, and also based on the priority of the alert. In this case, we fired a monitor, and if it was priority 1 during office hours, it's going to use this escalation policy here. If we drill into that escalation policy, you can see what happens if nobody accepts or marks as resolved or escalates. So they're the 3 actions that can be taken for this particular page. If no one takes any of those actions after 5 minutes, it will move to the next stage, and then that will have a broader notification rule. And if no one then acknowledges that call, or otherwise in that 5 minutes, it's going to go on and on and on. So you can add layers and layers of action based on if nobody takes any action. So if and when somebody does acknowledge or take action on that particular page, then we move to the next stage of processing. In terms of scheduling, so you'll have noticed that in the escalation policy, there's something called primary follow the sun. So that's the first schedule that we've used. And if I go into that schedule, you can actually see who's on call right now for the payments transactions team. And you can see Benjamin is that person. You can see if I drill into that particular schedule, I can look at the month, day, week view, and I can see how that's going to pan out across those 7 members. You can also see some analytics as to who's been on call the most in the last period of time. So you can see that clearly. And what you can also see, if you go to edit this particular schedule, you can see we've got 3 rotations. So we've got Japan, France, and US. And the various members of that payments team would be allocated to one or more of those rotations. And then that will give us that coverage. In this case, it's follow the sun. So we've got a global roster that we've set up. So without further ado, let's keep going. So let's say that somebody was paged on the Datadog app at 3 o'clock in the morning. They happen to be on call. So let's say it's Benjamin is on call. They would get that on the device. They can make a decision. They can acknowledge that, which means they're going to process it later on. It just means it will stop the alerts from firing. Or they can mark it as resolved, which means there's no issue, we can all go back to bed, or they can declare an incident. And if they declare incident, that generally means it's customer impacting. And so in this case, this will create an incident. We've set it up to be able to create an incident collaboration zone. And that's what this thing is here. So we've got an incident. It's got a unique number. It's connected to a number of downstream services like ServiceNow and Jira. So it's going to have a bi-directional integration with those downstream services. And that will mean that if we fix this issue, it's going to be reflected on both those systems. Also, we've got some chat integrations as well. So we've got Slack and Teams. So you can have all of the steps of all of the actions that are taken are recorded not just in this journal in Datadog, but also in the chat applications. And that means you don't have to come into Datadog to update this particular incident. You can do that in chat or Teams. We also have a few others as well, and this is a growing list of integrations. So we'll be adding more as we work through. Looking at this particular incident, you can see the timeline. So when it was first created, it was triggered by a monitor, and you can see that here was based on logs and an error count. You can see also the actual runbook. So when somebody designed this particular monitor, they put some steps for the SREs to check, and that might be look at this this Confluence page and see what to do. Maybe you need to restart the server or something like that. And so that's put it into this particular timeline. So the first action that's taken in this case is the Datadog has an autonomous agent called Bits AI, and Bits AI has been set up to automatically start investigating issues. And you can set this up, you can define the scope of this, but in this case, for this particular incident, Datadog is going to start doing that on its own, and it's going to create a notebook of all the things that it's done. And if we go into that notebook, you can see the journal of what it's doing, what the plan was, what the investigation steps are, and then all of the telemetry that is used in working on this incident. So if you read through the journal, you can see, the time series around this restaurant's API service has some increase in errors. So that's a metric, and you can see it's pasted that in there. You can also see it's done some log analysis, which it thinks might be correlated. So it's yet to be proven, but it's coming up with ideas around correlating metrics, logs, and traces to this particular incident to see if there's any correlation there. It's also, because RUM has been set up, you can see that there's 5,738 customers that are impacted by this customer impacting issue. And so it's useful that it's got all of that extra context. So the Bits AI is also smart enough to know who the service owner is of this particular service. In this case, it's a lady called Kai, and she's been slacked, and she's joined the conversation via Slack, and she's basically saying looks like there's some issue in the database, and she's going to investigate that, and looks like an index has not been put in, and so she's going to go ahead and put that index in. And then in the meantime, she's suggested, is there anything we can do to mitigate this in the short term? and the Bits AI has come up with some solution around relieving the thread pool exhaustion issue. And so it's come up with that suggestion, and the product owners come and implemented that workaround, and immediately we've seen the impact. So obviously that's worked, and then Kai has said that she's happy with that as a workaround. So we've kind of set that incident to resolved in the sense that it's no longer impacting customers. So this is kind of the flow of this autonomous Bits AI. It's always there, it's always helping, it's proactively looking for issues. And because it's in Datadog, it's got access to all of that rich telemetry to be able to correlate really effectively. So think of it like having an SRE that knows your system, knows who owns what, knows the dependencies, and has access to all of your telemetry and is never asleep. So that's a pretty useful person to have on the team. In this case, you can see we've resolved that issue. So what do we do after we resolve issues? Typically, we will work on a post-mortem. And so you can see in this case, we've generated the post-mortem already for 3806. And this was basically AI generated by Bits. And you can see a whole bunch of data points around what was done, an exec summary, the key services that were involved, a key timeline about what happened, when the investigation started, and when it was resolved. And then you've got all the key factors that contributed to the issue, how we actually resolved the issue in the end, which was the database index, what the customer impact was, how and what lessons that we learned, so maybe we can improve in the future, and then what are the action items to follow up. So a really nice consolidation of everything that happened, all of the facts with links to all of the telemetry, but also this is a document now that can be saved to PDF. So I can export that to PDF and send it to the team or store it in my systems of record. So that's something that can save a ton of time. These postmortems usually take weeks, if not months, to pull together. So because Datadog has access, as I mentioned, it can do it in seconds. Okay, so the next thing to look at is how do we look at and evaluate the on-call team and the process as a whole, and how efficient those teams are at resolving issues. So the analytics page is that one-stop shop. It will give you some key overview statistics. So the total page in the last week, there's 3,000. The MTTA is around 3 hours, and the mean time to resolve is about an hour and a half, which is worse by 23% over the same period. You can also see which teams have the most load in terms of pages, and you can see the global stats as well. So which users get paged the most, which services are the most noisy, and which monitors contribute the most amount of pages. And then the long running pages and so on and so forth. So all of this data is available. You can customize that as your own dashboard. We have also incident management overview dashboard out of the box as well. This will give you the ability to look at trend information over a longer period of time. So for example, things like outage, response, and service details around how services are performing. So everything is there packaged up. You may have noticed also on the collaboration page for the incident, there was a run workflow. So as we build out our capabilities around automation, this is a natural thing for us to do, is to be able to connect the dots with an action. So for example, with our API, and the fix in this case was to put an index in. Well, there may be other fixes that we can automate, such as restarting a service or scaling out some pods and so on and so forth. So we've built this framework where you can build workflows, and those workflows can be triggered as part of an incident response. So you can also do it so it's interactive with Slack as well, but you can use this logic to do that. And then maybe the the owner of the service needs to click yes or no to continue, and maybe that would then scale out the pod. So you've got all of that capability there on tap. So just to kind of summarize, I showed how on-call can be set up as the kind of action to take when an alert fires, and then I went into the paging process and how escalations occur, and then we looked at scheduling. Then we looked at the incident management page and how we can use Bits AI to autonomously work on and help resolve incidents faster. Hopefully you found that useful, and that's it from me.